Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into something, well, pretty intense. We're looking at Yuri Bezmenov.
Ah, yes, the former KGB officer who defected.
Exactly. He was right there on the inside of Soviet subversion efforts. So his perspective is really unique, gives us a look at how information, how influence can be, well, weaponized.
Right. It's quite chilling stuff.
Yeah. Our source material for this deep dive is mainly transcripts from a YouTube video where Bezmenov himself talks about his life, his work.
A really compelling interview, that one.
It is. Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Imagine, if you will, a world where reality itself is being sort of subtly twisted, reshaped. That's what we're getting into today, through his eyes. So our mission really is to unpack his, frankly, remarkable life story, from Soviet insider to defector, and take a critical look at his claims about ideological subversion, its long-term effects.
What does it even mean to change the perception of reality? That's a key question.
Right, and why his story still feels so relevant, especially when we think about information warfare today.
What's fascinating here is how Bezmenov provides almost a blueprint. It's not just history, it's a process, he claims, of how minds can be influenced, shaped over generations.
Yeah, a blueprint. That's a good way to put it. And his own journey, well, it started from a place of, relative privilege within the Soviet system.
Right. Born 1939, Moscow suburb. Son of a high-ranking Soviet army officer.
Yeah, an inspector of land forces, stationed in places like Mongolia, Cuba, Eastern Europe. So he definitely grew up with certain advantages.
Yeah, absolutely, which led to an elite education. Institute of Oriental Languages, part of Moscow State University. Graduated 1963.
He studied languages, history, literature, even music, apparently.
And he mentioned being encouraged to look like an Indian for some assignments, kind of an early hint at the sort of specialized work he'd end up doing.
Yeah, foreshadowing. And then, boom, right at the end of his schooling, the KGB recruits him.
Right. He even joked about a picture from that day, saying something like how happy it feels to be recruited by the KGB. A bit darkly ironic, maybe, in hindsight.
You think? Definitely a huge turning point.
Absolutely. His first gig as an operative was actually in India, a translator, with a Soviet group building refineries. Bihar, Gujarat states.
And at first he said he was, naively, idealistically believing he was contributing to something positive? International understanding?
Yeah, that was his initial take.
Yeah.
Helping nations cooperate.
But while that idealism clearly didn't stick around, what was the first big crack for him? When did he start questioning things in India?
It seems the big shift happened when he got back to Moscow. He was immediately pulled into the Novosti press agency.
Ah, Novosti.
Yeah, and he's very blunt about it.
Yeah.
He calls it a propaganda and ideological subversion front for the KGB, flat out.
He claimed 75% of the people there were actually KGB officers?
75%, yeah. Commissioned officers. That's a huge number. It really showed him, what the real game was.
And some of the assignments he describes, just wild. Like the thing with keeping foreign guests drunk.
Oh, yeah. That's quite something.
Beyond just, getting them tipsy, what was the real goal there? Did he say how effective it was at, killing awareness?
It was totally calculated. His job, one of his functions, was literally to keep foreign guests permanently intoxicated the moment they land at Moscow airport for 15, 20 days.
Wow.
He'd make toasts, friendship, all that, using vodka specifically to kill the awareness or curiosity of the foreign journalists.
So lower their guard completely.
Right. Then he'd strategically pull back the booze and approach the ones he thought were most recruitable for, joint communiques or whatever.
And he had pills to stay sober himself.
Get this, yeah. Special pills so he wouldn't get drunk. This wasn't some party, it was a method. Lower inhibitions, get intel, manipulate the story. Highly disciplined.
It really does sound like something out of a spy movie, but it was his actual job. And then controlling the media narrative. He mentioned Look magazine in 1967. A U.S. group came over for the 50th anniversary of the revolution.
Yeah, 12 people. And Bezmenov claims the article they published afterwards. From the first page to the last page, it was a package of lies.
Just propaganda cliches presented to American readers as opinions and deductions of American journalists.
His words.
And it wasn't just managing them once they got there. He talked about these backgrounders Novosti cooked up.
Right, like dossiers.
Yeah, 20, 25 pages of info, opinions. They gave these to journalists before they even booked their flights to Moscow.
Seriously.
Yeah. And how the journalists reacted to the backgrounder basically determined if they'd get a visa or not.
That's pre-screening on a whole other level,
Yeah.
filtering them before they even step foot in the country. Did he ever say Like, who got denied based on that?
He didn't name names in that particular chat, but the system itself, yeah, it complies a pretty strict filter. You had to be seen as, well, receptive, I guess.
Okay.
And he also talked about these stage tours, taking groups of progressive intellectuals, journalists, showing them exemplary kindergartens.
Which were actually prisons for children of political prisoners out in Siberia, he claimed. And staged weddings, too. He mentioned Edward Kennedy dancing at one in the Russian Palace of Marriages.
All just to project this false, happy image of Soviet life, a curated reality.
Exactly. Potemkin villages, basically, for foreign consumption.
And it wasn't just focused outwards. He mentioned this secret Department of Research and Counterpropaganda inside the KGB.
Right. Compiling massive files on anyone instrumental in creating public opinion.
Publishers, editors, journalists, actors, professors, politicians, businessmen.
Yeah, you name it. Key influencers. And they categorized them.
How so?
Basically, those who toe the Soviet foreign policy line would get promoted, helped along. Those who refused, they'd be targeted. Character assassinated or executed physically come revolution.
Chilling. That's long-term strategic thinking, isn't it? Not just immediate propaganda, but identifying who to cultivate and who to neutralize, potentially years down the line.
Absolutely. He even got sent to check out Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's ashram at one point.
The meditation guy? Why?
KGB wanted to know, what kind of VIP Americans attend this school? Bezmenov saw meditation, things like that, as a way to distract people.
Distract them from what?
From real issues of the United States, he said. Channeling their energy into, quote, a known world non-existent harmony. He felt it contributed to a kind of dim realization of American society, weakening focus.
Wow. Okay, so he's deep in this world of manipulation, cynicism. What finally broke him? What made him decide to get out?
He described it mainly as moral indignation, a rebellion against the inhuman methods of the Soviet system.
So it wasn't just one thing, but an accumulation.
Seems like it. He particularly objected, he said, first of all, against oppression of my own dissidents and intellectuals. Seeing that brutality up close really got to him.
And his experience back in India also played a big role, right?
Huge. He went back, and instead of seeing freedom, progress, and friendship being brought by the Soviets, he said, to his horror, he discovered they brought racism, exploitation, and slavery.
That's a stark contrast to the official line.
Totally. He said he developed a split loyalty. He genuinely fell in love with this beautiful country, India, admired its great humility, great tolerance, and philosophical and intellectual freedoms.
Especially compared
to his own ancestors who, he said, used to live in caves and eat raw meat when India was a highly civilized nation 6,000 years ago. That historical perspective hit him hard.
And then came another major shock, something he found in the files.
Yeah, this was a big one. He found KGB files listing people for execution. And among them were pro-Soviet journalists, leftists, the very people he'd been dealing with, cultivating even.
The so-called useful idiots.
Exactly. He said when he discovered that, he was sick. His KGB teachers had told him, never bother. The leftists forget about these political prostitutes, aim higher for actual recruitment.
But they were still useful for propaganda.
Right. But the plan was always to eliminate them after they'd served their purpose. Why? Because they know too much.
That is incredibly cynical. So even people who thought they were allies, pushing the Soviet message, were just disposable tools, marked for death.
It completely undermines any idea of shared belief, doesn't it? Just pure, ruthless calculation.
So that discovery, plus another major event, finally pushed him over the edge.
Yes. He said the immediate impulse to defect was Bangladesh crisis. He saw India being used as a jumping board to destroy East Pakistan.
How so?
He saw thousands of so-called students traveling through India to East Pakistan, and a colleague found boxes labeled printed matter to Dhaka University.
Which actually contained
Kalashnikov guns and ammunition.
Yeah.
He tried to warn the CIA, apparently.
They
blew him off, said he was reading too many James Bond novels or something, dismissed him.
Unbelievable, given what he knew firsthand. So, okay, he knew he had to defect.
Right.
But doing that from India as a Soviet diplomat.
Near impossible. He called it next to impossible, even suicide.
Because of Soviet pressure and that Indian law?
Yeah, the law Indira Gandhi pushed through, stating, no defector from any country has a right of political asylum in any embassy on the territory of Indian Republic. The Soviets had huge influence. It was incredibly dangerous.
So how did he manage it?
He called it the craziest possible way to defect. He decided to basically blend in with a group of American hippies.
Hippies? Seriously?
Yeah. Studied them, then joined them, barefoot, long hair, smoking hash, the whole deal. Bought a wig, changed his clothes.
Transformed himself from a conservative Soviet diplomat into a very progressive American hippie. His description.
That's exactly what he said. It's quite an image, isn't it? Shows how desperate he must have been.
No kidding. That's wow. So he gets out, makes it to Greece.
Right. Debriefed by the CIA in Athens for about 6 months.
And then he chose Canada.
Yeah, settled in Canada. Changed his name to Thomas Schumann to protect his family and friends back home. Worked all sorts of jobs.
Like what?
Everything from farm help and laundry truck driver to a language instructor and broadcaster for the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, in Montreal.
Ah, the CBC job. That's where things got complicated again, right?
Yep. Even in the West, the KGB didn't just forget about him. It took about 5 years, but they figured out who Thomas Schumann was, likely through his Russian language broadcasts for CBC's overseas service.
And then they came after him.
The Soviet ambassador at the time, Alexander Yakovlev, apparently made it his personal effort to discredit me. Complained directly to the Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau.
And the CBC?
Bezmenov said their management behaved in a very strange, cowardly way. They investigated his broadcasts, put pressure on him, and basically forced him out.
So the bureaucratic pressure worked, even if direct threats didn't?
Seems so. He mentioned facing subtle intimidations too, like someone warning him to please cross the street carefully.
But he didn't back down.
No, he said he told them off. Something like, this is a free country and I am as free as you are. I also can drive very fast and gun control is not yet established in Canada, so I had a couple of good shotguns. Welcome to visit me someday with your Kalashnikov machine guns.
Whoa! He really pushed back.
He did. He felt the KGB failed to intimidate him personally, but on the highest level, on the level of Canadian bureaucracy, they were successful.
That really shows the long reach, doesn't it? Even after you defect, they can still apply pressure through different channels, bureaucracy, institutions.
Exactly. It highlights the persistent, multi-layered approach of these organizations and the challenges defectors face even once they're supposedly safe.
Definitely. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Beyond his own story, Bezmenov really focused on explaining this concept of ideological subversion.
Right. And he was adamant this is not spying in the traditional sense.
Yeah, he claimed only about, 15% of the effort, time, money, manpower goes into actual espionage?
15%, yeah. The other 85% is a slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, or psychological warfare, his terms.
And the goal of this 85% effort?
Absolutely chilling. To change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, of their families, their community, and their country.
Basically, to make people unable to recognize truth or danger even when it's right in front of them.
Precisely. Psychological warfare, he called it.
Yeah.
And he said it's visible if you just unplug your banana from the ears and open up their eyes.
Gotta love his phrasing.
Okay.
So he broke this whole subversion process down into 4 stages.
That's right. Stage 1, demoralization.
And this one takes a long time.
15 to 20 years, he estimated. Minimum time needed to educate one generation of students in the target country, exposing them constantly to the enemy ideology for him, Marxism-Leninism.
Without it being challenged.
Right, without it being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism.
The patience involved there is just something else. And the result, according to him,
he claimed that most of the people who graduated in 60s, dropouts, or half-baked intellectuals are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media educational system. Pretty provocative statement.
Very. He said they're essentially contaminated, programmed to think and react in a certain pattern.
Yeah, and that their minds cannot be changed, even if you expose them to authentic information. He thought this stage was already basically completed in the U.S. back when he was speaking. Overfulfilled, even.
He even said taking someone to a concentration camp wouldn't change their mind until they got a kick in his fat bottom. Pretty harsh.
Very harsh, very direct. Okay, so after demoralization comes stage 2, destabilization.
This one's quicker.
Much quicker. 2 to 5 years, he reckoned. And here, the focus shifts away from ideas or consumer habits.
To what?
To the essentials, he said. Economy, foreign relations, defense systems, radicalizing those core areas.
And he seemed almost surprised at how successful this was becoming.
Yeah, he expressed disbelief, called it absolutely fantastic, how much influence Marxist-Leninist ideas were gaining in those really sensitive areas of U.S. defense economy. faster than he expected.
Okay, so demoralization, destabilization. What's stage 3?
Stage 3 is crisis. This could be very fast, maybe up to 6 weeks.
And the goal here is?
To bring a country to the verge of crisis, push it over the edge. He pointed to Central America at the time as an example of this stage in action.
A violent catalyst, essentially.
Right, leading to the final stage, stage 4, normalization.
Normalization. That sounds deceptively calm.
Exactly. He said it's a cynical expression born from Soviet propaganda. Like after the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, Brezhnev said the situation was now normalized.
So it means imposing the new order after the crisis?
Pretty much. His prediction for the U.S. under this stage was a violent change of power structure and economy, leading to a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with the benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale who will promise lots of things.
Specific names and all?
Yeah. He warned Americans would be living in a kind of peacetime false, while the country was actually in an undeclared total war against the basic principles and the foundations of this system.
That raises a huge question, doesn't it? What happens when a society is constantly told everything's fine, everything's normal, while its foundations are actually being eroded underneath?
It's a deeply unsettling thought. How do you recognize the danger if the official narrative is normalization?
He definitely wasn't shy about saying what he thought needed to be done. He had some very direct recommendations.
Very. He called for a very strong national effort to educate people in the spirit of real patriotism.
And to really explain the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever welfare state, big brother government, He felt if people didn't grasp that, well, nothing could save the U.S.
He also had a message about foreign policy. He urged people to force United States government to stop aiding communism, period.
Oh.
No credits, no technology, no money, no political or diplomatic recognition, and of course no such idiots as great deals of USSR. Stop propping them up, basically.
He even claimed the Soviet people themselves would be thankful.
Yeah, 270 millions of Soviets will be eternally thankful to you if you stop aiding a bunch of murderers who sit now in Kremlin. Strong words.
And his warnings about the timeline were incredibly stark.
Urgent, yeah. He said basically, you have literally several years to live on unless the United States wake up. The time bomb is ticking.
He really doesn't pull any punches, does he? He frames it as outright survival.
Absolutely. He called the U.S. the last country of freedom. And if it falls, there's nowhere to defect to unless you want to live in Antarctica with penguins.
Wow. And he had a specific warning for capitalists, for wealthy business people too, right?
Oh, yeah. Directly challenged them. Said they are selling the rope on which they will hang very soon if they don't stop it.
Basically accusing them of funding their own destruction by dealing with communist regimes.
That was his argument, yeah. A matter of fundamental self-preservation they were ignoring.
So look, whether you buy into every single part of his analysis or not, you can't deny Bezmenov offers this incredibly unique first-hand perspective.
Absolutely. It's a look at how information, or maybe misinformation, can be used as a weapon. Not on a battlefield, but like within society itself.
His story gives you a framework maybe for thinking about how perceptions can be deliberately manipulated over really long timescales.
And that really raises a critical question for all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we as individuals, as a society, how do we develop the critical thinking skills? The intellectual honesty, really, to see through it, to discern truth when there's so much effort potentially being put into shaping what we see and believe.
Yeah.
His story is a challenge, I think, to constantly question the narratives we're given and to think about the long-term consequences.
It really is. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Consider how those concepts he talked about, demoralization, perception management, how might they apply, if at all, to the information environment we live in today? If Bezmenov were here now, looking at social media, 24/7 news cycles, what would he see as the biggest challenges? And what advice would he give us for unplugging our banana from the ears in the 21st century?